I'd like to call this special council meeting to order. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom live in our community and provide to the richness of the life in our community, and many of whom have taught us how we can be good stewards of the land. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present with the exception of Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you. There is one addendum, the Appendix 5 to PBBS 40-2025 now includes the names and addresses of the individuals who communicated with the municipality with respect to the contents of that report. I want to wish everyone a happy Canada Day tomorrow, and I want to hand the announcements over to Councillor Christensen just to make a couple of comments with respect to the Fort Erie Public Library.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I've just received copies and distributed to members of council and senior staff the annual report of the Fort Erie Public Library. I just wanted very briefly to draw the council's attention to some of the successes in 2024, which includes a 32% increase in the visits to the library, an almost 12% increase in digital circulation, so we're definitely keeping up with the needs of younger people as well as older people who are familiar with electronic media. Total circulation's almost 79,000, 5,828 members, of whom 1,213 are new patrons in the year. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the Friends of the Fort Erie Public Library, who have contributed over $78,000 to the library since 2015. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Councillor Christensen, and certainly the Fort Erie Public Library is one of the bright spots of our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, Councillor Flagg, you have a resolution for us to go into closed session with respect to employment matters?
I do, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Christensen that council now does go into closed session at 5:35 p.m. to consider item 6.1, Canadian Union of Public Employees and its local 714 collective pursuant to section 239 2D of the Municipal Act 2001, labor relations or employee negotiations.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried, so we're going to close session. We're back in the council chamber, and Councillor Lewis, you have the resolution for us to rise and reconvene from closed session.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Flagg that council does now rise and reconvene from closed session at 6:06 p.m. with report for item 6.1 that staff proceed as directed in closed session.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us then to public meetings, and this evening we have a public meeting with respect to an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 3856 Terrace Lane and an unassigned parcel of property on Crystal Beach Drive. This public meeting is pursuant to the Planning Act, and it's a legislative requirement for us to hold a public meeting in connection with any application made to the town for development approval. Anyone is entitled to make an application for development approval, and the municipality has a statutory obligation to review and proceed with that application. Part of the process is the public meeting. The staff will have gone through this and has provided us with an information report. Some of you may have seen that. One of the members of our staff, Devin Morton, will be providing us with some background material as part of the public meeting. He will then be subject to any questions that members of council may have with respect to his presentation and the material that he provides to us. After he's finished, we'll ask the developer, the proponent of the application, or the proponent's agent to address council if they wish, and again, will be subject to any questions that council may have. Thereafter, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience other than the applicant or the applicant's agent who wishes to speak in favor of the application. And again, anyone that comes forward will be asked to give their name and address and will be subject to any questions that council may have. I'll then ask Mr. Patton, who is monitoring the digital waiting room, if there's anyone who wishes to speak at that time to council. And thereafter, I'll ask if there is anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application or has questions that they want to raise with members of council regarding the application. Again, you'll be asked to give your name and address, and anyone who addresses council may be asked questions by members of council. I'll again go back to Mr. Patton to see if there's anyone left in the digital waiting room. And after that, I'll ask the clerk if there is anyone who has provided any information to the town since this report, PBBS 40 for 2025, was prepared, and she will provide that information as well. All of the information taken this evening becomes part of the record with respect to this application and can be utilized in future proceedings. Those proceedings would be either council consideration of a recommendation report, or if the proponent is not happy with the decision of council at any point, the Ontario Land Tribunal to which the developer may appeal. So having provided that information, I'm going to ask Mr. Morton to come forward and provide us with some background information. Good evening, Mr. Morton.
Good evening. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public in attendance. My name is Devin Morton. I am the Supervisor of Development Approvals with the Town of Fort Erie. The purpose of tonight's presentation is simply to provide information to Council as it relates to a combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application for lands municipally known as 3856 Terrace Lane and the unassigned parcel 015097 Crystal Beach Drive. The applications were submitted by the applicant, Lou Pompili, on behalf of the owners, a numbered Ontario company, and a numbered Nova Scotia company. I need your assistance. Perfect, thank you, Cole. So
So the official plan amendment proposes to change the land use designation of the subject lands to a core mixed-use special policy area in the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan to facilitate development of a 10-story, 100-unit residential apartment building with a density of 385 units per hectare. The special policy area seeks to add apartment buildings as a permitted use and relates to density, land assembly, height, and access. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the subject lands to a site-specific residential multiple 1 RM1 zone. The requested site-specific provisions relate to lot area, lot coverage, setbacks, height, and density. Notice of today's public meeting was provided in accordance with the Planning Act by placing a sign on the subject lands and circulating a notice of public meeting by regular mail on June 6, 2025, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands. The proposed applications are subject to a 120-day processing and review timeline. The timeline begins the day the applications are deemed complete and concludes the day council makes a decision. Currently, we are at the public meeting phase and day 84 of the 120-day timeline. As illustrated here, the subject lands are located within the urban boundary in the Crystal Beach settlement area. Subject lands are municipally addressed as 3856 Terrace Lane and include an unassigned parcel 015097 Crystal Beach Drive, Fort Erie. The subject lands are comprised of 2 interior lots that, when assembled, form a through lot with 30.5 meters of frontage onto Crystal Beach Drive and a smaller portion fronting onto Terrace Lane. The subject lands are approximately 0.26 hectares in area and are vacant but support a remnant dune landform and woodland. The subject lands are adjacent to existing low-density residential uses, the Crystal Beach Waterfront Park and Boat Launch, and the Crystal Beach Wastewater Treatment Plant. The subject lands are surrounded by the following uses. To the north, Crystal Beach Drive and the Crystal Beach Wastewater Treatment Plant. To the east, single detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and vacant land. To the south, an apartment building being the Palmwood, Crystal Beach Waterfront Park and Boat Launch, and to the west, single detached dwellings. So here we have a photo of the subject lands. As mentioned prior, the subject lands are currently vacant but support a remnant dune and woodland. And next we have the dune itself. I've included this slide simply to illustrate the incline and decline associated with the feature. The first photo illustrates the sidewalk used to traverse the incline, followed by photos of the views north and south once you reach the top. In terms of neighborhood context, the lands are located in an area undergoing transition. As shown in the first photo, Crystal Beach can be defined by its cottage character. However, there are numerous examples of contemporary subdivisions in the immediate area, including the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club, photo 2, and South Coast Village, which is photo 3. Finally, the last photo illustrates the Palmwood, a 5-story mixed-use building located approximately 80 meters from the subject lands. So here we have views from Crystal Beach Drive looking north to the subject lands and south to the region's wastewater treatment plant. I note this is the location where vehicular access is proposed. Here we have views from Crystal Beach Drive looking east and west. I note there are no sidewalks along the frontage of the property, and the photo looking east illustrates the retaining wall that will need to be salvaged in accordance with infrastructure services comments. Here we have views from Terrace Lane looking north to the subject lands and south to the adjacent playground and vehicular parking. And finally, we have views from Terrace Lane looking east to the Palmwood and west to Ridgeway Road. So in terms of recreational opportunities, the subject lands are adjacent to Lake Erie and the Crystal Beach Waterfront Park. Beyond the Erie Road commercial corridor, there are a number of commercial establishments located in proximity to the subject lands, including the Crystal Chandelier, Red Apple, Pharmasave, and the Breakfast Beacon. Here we have the proposed site plan submitted in support of the applications. Vehicular access to the site is proposed from Crystal Beach Drive by way of 3 parking ramps leading to under and above ground parking levels. The development proposes common areas on levels 2 and 3, an indoor pool with locker and shower rooms on level 3, a fitness room on level 2, ground floor and rooftop patios, convenience retail and food services on level 3, and common party rooms on levels 9 and 10. Staff note the owner has confirmed the convenience retail and food service component of the proposal is intended for the exclusive use of owners, guests, and renters. As confirmed in the information report, 3856 Terrace Lane is designated urban residential and environmental protection, whereas unassigned parcel 015097 is designated urban residential only. The urban residential designation supports a range of residential uses, including but not limited to single detached dwellings, duplexes, semi-detached dwellings, townhouses, and multiple unit dwellings or apartments. Other uses that make up a neighborhood, including schools, churches, parks, day nurseries, and public utilities, and neighborhood commercial uses are also supported. The applicant has applied to change the land use designation of the subject lands to a core mixed use special policy area in the Crystal Beach secondary plan. Development planning staff note the core mixed use land use designations call for commercial uses at grade with residential uses above. Staff are confused why this land use designation was selected if commercial uses are not proposed. As confirmed in the information report, 3856 Terrace Lane is zoned residential 2B R2B zone and hazard H zone. Unassigned parcel 015097 Crystal Beach Drive is zoned residential R2B zone in accordance with zoning bylaw 12990. The applicant has applied to rezone the subject lands to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone with a range of departures identified to facilitate the proposal. Select zoning departures are discussed in further detail as we continue. So just before we begin kind of looking at this slide, I just wanted to state that there are a number of zones at play when we're looking at this proposal. So firstly, the Crystal Beach secondary plan is not in force in effect, which means the implementing zoning is also not in force in effect. So the first column displayed here are the zoning regulations. The next column, titled Zoning Current, represents the in effect zoning as of today. The column adjacent to that represents the zoning established through the Crystal Beach secondary plan, which I repeat is not in force in effect. And the fourth column, titled Zoning Proposed, is the applicant's requested departures, and the final column represents the base zone, being either RM1 or RM2. So in terms of permitted uses, as illustrated, the applicant seeks to add apartments and short-term rentals dedicated as a permitted use. Short-term rentals are highlighted in red as this was not included in the applicant's draft bylaw, but has been confirmed via discussions with them. So here you can see select zoning departures required to facilitate the proposal. These relates to setbacks, height, lot coverage, and density, among many others. So for those of you who had an opportunity to look at the information report, this is obviously a much more condensed version. Some of the reasons being through discussions with the applicant about the commercial component. If they're not actually proposing commercial component, a lot of those zoning departures disappear. So effectively what I've tried to do here is just present 2 slides that kind of synthesize the most pertinent departures that would be required. Okay, I've included this and the following slide, as there has been some discussion on how we define height and stories of the proposed buildings. Based on the definitions that are found in the zoning bylaw, development planning staff consider this a 10-story apartment. So here we have the definitions of finished grade and front lot line, which you would need when referring to the previous definitions. So the following studies were submitted in support of the applications and are available for review in person at Town Hall, on the town's website, or by accessing the hyperlinks included in the information report and in this presentation. In terms of comments from development engineering, there have been no capacity constraints identified. However, as confirmed in the information report, the functional servicing report, geotechnical investigations, the addendum, noise study, and odor assessments are subject to peer review. The results of the peer review will be included in the recommendation report to be presented to council at a later date. In terms of comments from natural heritage, environmental planning staff have confirmed that the natural heritage resource manual was relied upon when determining if the existing woodland should be considered a significant woodland. So it is environmental planning staff's opinion that the existing woodland does qualify as a significant woodland. A public information open house was held on May 5th, 2024. Thank you for all of you who came out and attended. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands were notified of the meeting. Town planning staff and the agent were in attendance, and approximately 75 members of the public attended the open house. There were several objections to the proposal, all of which are summarized in the information reports and presentation. I would note to any members of the public, if you notice your comments are missing, my apologies. I have been inundated with a few emails from concerned residents, so please resend me those if they are not included this evening. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morton. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the width of Terrace Lane and the width of Crystal Beach Drive.
Do you know what they are?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear your question.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't know the ultimate width of those right-of-ways off the top of my head. I know that Terrace Lane is undersized. However, if you take a look at the Crystal Beach secondary plan, there are policies in there that encourage the retention of that existing street network because it is part of the character of Crystal Beach.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor
Thank you, Your Worship.
Flagg.
I knew you were talking to me. And thank you for your presentation. With respect to this application, can you explain what a minimum interior side yard is?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, so minimum interior side yard would be a setback to a lot line. In this case, because these are both interior lots, the westerly and easterly lot lines we would consider as the interior lot lines. And we apply a minimum setback, generally speaking, to those lot lines for a number of reasons, one of which is privacy, overlook, sufficient space for drainage, access, maintenance, landscaping, and many more.
And if I can continue.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So we have recommended, or the recommendation is somewhere in the 9.5 meter range, according to this. And their recommendation or their desire is to have 0.1 meter, which, if my arithmetic is correct, is around 3.5 inches.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, that is what is proposed.
Anything further, Councillor?
Nothing at all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, and you stole my thunder on that one, Councillor Flagg. And thank you for the presentation tonight and also confirming how staff are looking at the total height for this project, because I know that's been an issue of much debate and certainly some angst from the community. In terms of environmental concerns associated with the property, I know the environmental EAC committee went out, thanks to Mr. Tonin, who allowed us on the property. Can you speak to some of the concerns related to the property, the dune, from an environmental aspect that may or may not have been included in some of the original reports?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. So I'll just state that I'm not an environmental planner, but I will do my best. So it's my understanding that under the PPS 2024, there is a definition of woodlands, and there's a separate definition of what makes them significant. The definitions are provided in the presentation, and from what I understand, there have been regionally rare species identified on the property in addition to trees that may be standing in excess of 100 years. Those two criteria, when combined together, satisfy the definition of a significant woodland under the PPS. And the PPS directs very strongly that development shall not be permitted on lands containing significant woodland. Jessica, I apologize in advance if I got something wrong there, but if there's additional details regarding the environmental that you'd like confirmation on, I'm happy to follow up with our environmental planner and get those for you.
Thank you for the clarity on that, and I know that was something I just wanted the neighborhood to hear specifically if they didn't have the opportunity to read the report that was before us tonight. And I appreciate the presentation, as always.
Anyone else? Mr. Morton, so just to get back to the height of the building, in the report, under the part that says what's requested by the applicant, it says 10 stories, 21 meters. So do you know how that was calculated? Or is the 21 meters an error?
Through you, sorry, are you asking if I know how they calculated the 21 meters?
Right.
No, I don't know how they calculated that.
But that's not likely accurate, is it?
It could be. I mean, a story is generally about 3 meters in height, so.
At 10 times 3, wouldn't that be 30?
Yeah, but you would have I'm saying 3 meters generally speaking. You can wiggle below that. I've seen them go to even, 2.5, so.
This would be 2.1.
Yeah.
So with respect,
Per story, not,
yeah.
2.5 meters per story.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay.
You made reference to some subdivisions in the neighborhood. Those are low-density subdivisions, single-family homes, some townhouses?
I'm not sure if they're low density, but definitely low to medium. Nothing that is even close to the 385 units per hectare that are proposed.
Right.
I would say like maximum maybe 75 units per hectare.
Right. And you also made reference to one of the slides to the access to the underground parking. Can you pull that slide up again? I missed that.
We got to go back a bit here, just bear with me. It's actually easiest to see it on one of these first ones here. There you go. So you can see on the left-hand side there, the front 3D level, Crystal Beach Drive. There's actually 3 parking entrances that are proposed. It looks as if one leads to an above-ground parking level. The other is probably at grade, and the third is below grade.
Okay. And you also made reference to the request to add a permitted use for short-term rentals for the zoning that's being requested. Currently, if this is an R2B zoning, qualifies for short-term rental because that's the zoning in our zoning bylaw. But that presumes it would be single-family dwelling or some type of low-density housing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. That would also require the applicant to conclude the OLT hearing. That would need to be addressed before they would be able to rely on those permissions.
Right. And I also wanted to just ask about the parking. So the amount of parking that would be required for this 10-story building is how many units?
So there's 100 units that are proposed at a ratio of 1.5. You'd be at 150 spaces.
So they're proposing about 2/3 of the required parking. Has the proponent provided any indication as to where the additional vehicles would go to park?
Thank you, Chair. No. There has been no confirmation of where any overflow parking would be accommodated.
And I noted as I went through the report that there were a number of items where requests for changes to the zoning were being advanced as part of the site-specific request for zoning, and not information was provided by the proponent. Does that cause you any concern at this stage?
My apologies. Do you mind repeating that for me?
Yeah, so as an example, loading space requirements, dimensions of loading spaces, access to loading spaces, calculation of parking requirements, ingress and egress, parking areas location, many of those say not provided.
Yeah, thank you. So with a few of them, I would have concerns. For example, the width of ingress and egress, I take issue with that. However, a lot of those zoning departures, as it relates to the commercial component, wouldn't be applicable now that the applicant has confirmed the commercial component is meant to solely service guests, renters, and owners. From a zoning perspective, and just as a planner, I don't consider that to be mixed use. That is more an internal component of your residential building. Therefore, we wouldn't apply those commercial regulations to that zoning.
So can you just maybe articulate that? So
Yeah.
if the commercial uses aren't made available to the public, then it's really not a core mixed-use zoning.
It would not be a core mixed-use land use designation, and the zoning would not regulate that commercial use. Therefore, none of those departures that have been identified as, we need more information, a lot of those would disappear.
Which would have an impact, I presume, then on the application, would it not?
Yep, there would be a revision to the application, and there's a few other items you'll notice that we've identified that the applicant has not, which would require a subsequent revision.
Have any of these deficiencies in the information been pointed out to the applicant by town staff?
Thank you, Chair. I have had meetings in the past with the applicant's planner to discuss or to get some rationale as to why the land use designation and subsequent zoning were selected. It is my understanding that they're gearing up to address those concerns and make a resubmission.
So I'm just trying to get my head around that. So we could be doing this again with a different submission?
Thank you, Chair. So we would have to, from my understanding, it was always the intent to bring back a recommendation report. So yes, we would be doing this again.
Okay, well, I'm surprised to hear that. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Morton. And if there are no other questions, then I'm going to ask if sorry, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, through you to Mr. Morton. Mr. Morton, and I'm just trying to get that there's no commercial anticipated at this point, although that's what they put the zoning for. And I'm not quite sure when you said there's an eating area or a food service or something like that. Are we talking about like a restaurant? Or are we talking about just like a common room?
Thank you, Chair, through you. So if you look at the site plan and floor plans, for example, there is an area, it's quite large, and it's labeled as commercial. Beyond that, no details have been provided as to what that commercial use would look like. I have had kind of off-the-record discussions. From what I understand, it would not be a restaurant. However, the applicant and agent are here today. Perhaps we could confirm with them. But from my understanding, it will not be like a public-facing restaurant, for example.
Okay. Thank you for that, but in regard to that commercial area, that large commercial area you were referring to, again, I don't know what the size of it is, but but they have taken that commercial aspect, or they've basically said we're not gonna use it for like weddings or showers or whatever. Because, again, I'm getting on these two things, is that it'll only be done for guests or people who rent. Well, if you rent the room, are you considered a renter? And then if that is the case, then I'm concerned about there's not enough parking spaces to start with. And if they start using that room for different events, I'm concerned.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think I understand what you're saying, but essentially, I don't think that is the intent. Like, I don't think that room, if it does become a room, is meant to be rented to the public. It would just be renters, guests, and owners of the property. So, you know, you live there and you're hosting a birthday party rather than having it in your unit, you have it there. But again, I think that discussion is a little premature in the sense that I don't even know if that's what the intent of that room would be. So I think I think we'd be better off to get confirmation from the owner as to what the intent of that commercial space is, because it's really hypothetical at this point.
And I can appreciate that, but again, with the parking being so limited, and already almost 1/3 less than it should be, even if somebody who rents there said, well, my daughter's getting married and we're going to have
Councillor Noyes, that's something that you can ask the owner, who's going to be coming up right
that's
after
fine.
Mr. Morton.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think if that were to become a true commercial space, we would apply parking standards to that as well.
So there would be additional parking required over and above the 150.
There would be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Morton. I think you're finished. For now. Okay, so this is an opportunity for the applicant or the applicant's agent to provide us with some background information or provide any responses to the matter. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Chair, members. My name is Lou Pompili. I'm the applicant. I'm actually one of the landowners as well. I don't have a presentation for you because I thought Devin was going to do a good job, which he did, in presenting the project. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Noyes.
Did you hear the questions I just asked about
Yes.
the commercial space? Can you enlighten us?
Sure. So the reason why we called it in general commercial, it will be exclusive use. It won't be a use that will be functional for the general public, like a restaurant, like the present restaurant that's at the building now, at the 5-story building, which is open to the public. This is strictly the use for the members, the owners, and the occupants and the renters. So there might be, to answer your question, there might be a wedding, but it's a wedding of one of the owner's family members that would use that space.
Well, thank you for that. That's my concern, is that it may be Mr. Smith who occupies, apartment 205, who wants to put a wedding, and invites like 50 or 70 or 100 guests. Parking is a concern.
Well, if you notice the description that I provided, this is a luxury condo hotel which allows for the rental and for the use for the occupants themselves. So at the end of the day, whether somebody has a big family and as an owner of the building, they have a right to use the space. That's why we made it as large as it is. And there's multiple additional uses that would go there, such as a hot table, pickup for laundry and the like, should they choose not to do it themselves. So that's why it hasn't been identified yet, because we're going through the process.
Again, my concern is the parking. You don't
I'm
have
sorry.
The parking, you don't have enough parking now.
I understand.
Okay, so that's,
The intent is not to have any street parking, everything is self-contained. The building is designed to be self-contained in relations to parking, to garbage collection, to garbage that's collected and brought to the curb or a location to be picked up on a regular basis. So everything is self-contained. We're not expecting to do anything than to use the roads to enter and to exit.
further question, in regards to short-term rentals, and I know we're kind of looking at a crystal ball here, how many of these units are you anticipating that would be used for short-term rentals?
Well, first of all, you have a definition for short-term rentals, and we've asked for a relief of that beyond that. So the intent would be that all of the units will be individually owned by condo owners. So the space is actually divided into 100 owners for argument's sake. So the use is only exclusive to those owners and their friends and their renters if they choose to rent the space.
Okay, so are we looking at then we're not looking then at owner occupied?
It could be owner occupied. It's up to the individual purchasers to either occupy the actual units themselves, their families, or to rent them. So there's that flexibility.
If I can continue, I'm getting somewhat confused on this. Okay, so if I wanted to be a short-term renter, not like purchase the apartment, I could then rent it out anytime to anyone, all the time. So technically, it could be all 100 units are short-term rentals.
Could be.
And
It
there
could
would
be
be-
also 100 units all occupied by the owners or owners' families.
Okay. I think.
So that's the intent of the flexibility. So it could be, you're using one extreme, the other extreme is where all the units will be owner occupied and the owners would have their families, kids, grandkids, whatever they may be, actually occupying the units
If I can
at their options.
just elaborate on this. What's your definition of owner occupied?
Owner occupied is someone that owns the unit and the owner and family can occupy the space, as it is elsewhere.
That's different than the short-term rental that you're
Yes.
talking about.
It is. We didn't introduce a short-term rental. The short-term rental was something that was being discussed between our planner and your planning department, which we intend to clarify, because we're not looking to use the space for 30 days or up to 30 days. Somebody could rent the space, for argument's sake, from the owner for a year. So that's one of the reliefs of the zoning.
I'm
Correct?
sorry, I'm sorry, I'm still confused.
Maybe you want to explain it.
Okay,
If I
Mr.
can't explain
Pompili-
it properly.
So, Mr. Pompili, this is your opportunity to respond to questions.
It's-
I'm responding, she's,
Yeah, we're just trying to understand
sure.
your proposal.
I'll keep going with my explanations,
Okay.
please.
To me, the second word is occupy, that the owner has to occupy the building or that unit while it's being rented. Can't be like in Miami and be renting it here and consider it under occupied.
Yeah, actually, someone who may be living in Buffalo can actually own a unit, to give you a quick example, and rent a unit to a renter. It doesn't have to be family per se.
But then that's not owner occupied.
Well, I think I don't think that Mr. Pompili is necessarily familiar with the categories of short-term rentals.
Okay.
Because it was never our intent to introduce a short renter criteria. The intent would be to use the units for occupancy by those that the owner chooses to. And the bylaws, and the condominium documents will work that through with staff, and that will be clarified, including clarification and restrictions.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I'm going to wade into this one, and thank you for your presentation tonight. I also want to start by thanking you for meeting with me early in the process and
My
sharing
pleasure.
some of your plans and also how they've adapted as you've been dealing with staff. I do have a couple of questions, some of which have already been asked in other ways by other councillors, but the 2/3 of the parking that's being given with your proposal, so there's 1/3 that there's no room already. you mentioned that it's designed to be self-contained. And I'm just having a hard time following how, if we're already short on parking per unit, how the unit could possibly be self-contained and not having any overflow into the neighborhood.
Let's look at the scenario where each owner occupies the space.
Yep, so we're talking 100 units.
That's right.
Okay, 100.
That's 100 spaces.
Yep.
We provided 10 additional spaces for unseen and other use. So technically speaking, we're not assuming that the occupants or the owners of the condos are going to be having 3, 4, 5 cars. They're going to have 1 car per family. That's the intent.
That's an assumption.
This whole thing is an assumption.
I don't disagree with that.
We've had that discussion, Tom, so, Mr. Lewis, my apologies. So, yes, so we're assuming that the individuals that are going to, like similar buildings we're doing elsewhere, they are bikers, they have 1 car, not necessarily multiple cars, and they're pedestrian because of the proximity to the beach and the local area. So it's a variety. So the assumption is that there'd be potentially one definite car per family, and that's how we came up with the parking.
And if I can continue on that one, so 1 parking per unit, understand it, following it completely.
Right.
So we're assuming in a 100-unit building, let's just call it a building for lack of whatever is being proposed, we're anticipating 10 visitors.
We're not anticipating 10 visitors. We're allowing for 10 additional space.
Okay, so I'm going to leave that one go.
Thank
The
you.
other one I wanted to just hone in on, because there's been some questions to me, and I think at the public meeting it came up as well. Can you speak about some of your development experience? And I know you and I have spoke when we met, but I think there's maybe some people here who haven't heard what experience you have in developing such projects and maybe where those are.
I didn't realize I'd have to provide a resume for the application of my personal experience, but I'll give it to you anyway. So I'm I'm a civil engineer, both structural and civil. I've done 48,000 units in condos with the likes of Cadillac Fairview and all large organizations that have land properties. So it's not that I physically owned the properties. I acted as, as I am here in some ways, as an expert and an agent for the type of use and the type of experience in building for condos, which I've done. And I give you one example, Marina del Rey, that's over 1,000 units in multiple buildings on Lake Ontario. There are other buildings that are 100-story buildings in New York City that I've done, hotel condos in Palm Beach, Florida, and elsewhere. I've done work all over.
And if I can continue, Your Worship, and thank you for the clarity. So of those previous projects,
Sure.
And some that you mentioned have thousands of units, what would be the comparison in terms of parking between what you're proposing in Crystal Beach to the other units?
Interesting question, because I'm also a former staff at the City of Toronto. So just wanted to add that as well. Parking has always been a moving target, because depending on the area, and also transportation, you don't necessarily have to have 1 per 1 parking, meaning 1.5 in this case parking spaces. All right, so the parking is an assumption, and it's based on the use of the actual building, the location of the building, the proximity to other types of transportation, such as public and public. So it's a question mark that gets answered once the building technically is occupied, but we've, in general, the projects that are in downtown Toronto right now have 1 parking space and sometimes 0.75 parking spaces per unit. So again.
And if I can continue,
And by the way, in New York City, some of the buildings that we build and have been occupied for years have 0 parking.
So this isn't New York City, as you.
I understand, no, but I'm giving you I'm sorry. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate it. I'm not comparing Crystal Beach to New York.
Well, you made the
He
comment.
asked the buildings that I've had experience with, and that's what I'm answering. So please appreciate the answer. I'm making a comparison with this project and other projects. I'm just giving you an example of the types of parking allocations that are now in use throughout.
Thank you. And if I can continue, and thank you for your clarity on that.
My pleasure.
The other with respect to the parking, just a comment before the question is, I understand parking's an assumption, but it's an assumption that we have to live with once we've made the decision. That's where I'm coming from.
We have to deal with all kinds of assumptions, and we have to live with all those assumptions as they become reality. And that only time will govern.
The other question I'm going to ask, and then I'll yield some time so that others can ask if they wish. Page 2019 of the report speaks to natural heritage, and I know I was out on site with the Ecological Environmental Advisory Committee to look at the property, but it mentions here that town staff reviewed the aerial photography from 1934, and that it appears the trees in question were in place at the time. It goes on further in the report to say that the impact study prepared by Beacon Environmental on March 20th, 25, so most recently, submitted in support of this application. It notes that the age of the trees, or the trees in particular, as mentioned in that aerial photography, are not mentioned whatsoever. I see that as a glaring omission, but I don't know if you have any questions in terms of that report.
I don't have any questions. I can tell you that our consultants are in conversation with your internal staff, and they're dealing with such matters, and we'll keep dealing with them going forward.
Okay, fair. And no other questions at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Christensen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pompili,
My pleasure.
for your comments and responses. I share with you a tenure in Toronto, at Metropolitan Toronto, as a land use planner, community planner, policy planner, and community developer. So I'm very interested. I wanted to draw your attention to our town's official plan comment in the report that says that the height, bulk, and arrangement of buildings and structures must achieve a harmonious design, compatible integration with the surrounding area, and not negatively impacting lower density residential uses. And I bear in mind the site of the apartment buildings from the Gardner as you drive into Metropolitan Toronto. And I'd like you to comment, if you could please, on how you believe this proposal would fit harmoniously into the community.
Well, I will only say this. What I did, and the planner that we actually hired is a former planner and also planning director and commissioner, if I could call him that, in other municipalities such as Port Colborne and the like. So we left it up to him to come up with the exactness of the planning and how he came up with the exactness of the specifics that he's provided in his study, and therefore are part of the comments. So we can go back to the planner, or we can provide you that explanation directly from the planner.
I would appreciate clarification. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, through you too, Louis. In the report, it talks about 13 boundary trees. What are you going to, and you need the neighbor to cooperate. Have you gained any of that cooperation at this point?
We can tell you that everybody's been cooperative, but we didn't get to the exactness of those details. The report that we received, with all due respect, despite the fact that we've had previous discussions, was issued last Thursday at 5 p.m. So our consultants haven't had an opportunity to study it, to prepare any responses to the concerns that have been raised by staff, and we will deal with it going forward. So please appreciate that I'm not trying not to give you an answer. I don't have an answer to give you at this particular point in time because of the timing that we've had to actually study the report.
Thank you for that, but, okay, our tree bylaw, which mentions the boundary trees, do you think that the people you hired or were looking at this, planning this, I mean, that's been put to bed a while ago, and the boundary tree definition is in there.
Councillor Noyes, all I can tell you is that they're experts in the field. They visited the site, and I can only, again, ask the question of them and the clarification, which we'll gladly provide going forward.
Okay, and the other part of that is that there are 4 public trees. And you would also need permission from the town.
Without a doubt, there are all kinds of stuff we're going to get into, discussions going forward with staff as we clear some of the concerns that have been raised. So as I said, we've only received that information last Thursday. We will deal with it, and we will deal with according with the planning department, the engineering department, the forestry, and the rest.
If I can continue.
You may.
Okay, in one of the minimum side yards, you have 3 inches, I think, or 3.5 inches. Again, it's those other guys that did the planning, did the site plan, you don't know. But if there's a boundary tree in that 3 inches,
Trees can be relocated.
only if
All
you-
trees, I'm sorry. To give you my benefit of experience, we have built in Mississauga and other areas where originally it was all forested. So we did a study, we had experts do studies, and those particular trees that were sensitive or rare, we actually relocated to a location that was common and approved to both the region, the county, in some cases, and the municipality. So
Yeah,
that's
again,
been my
that's-
experience in the last 45 years.
Okay, and I can appreciate you have 45 years of experience in Toronto, but I
No, I'm
don't
not just Toronto, ma'am.
But
Not just
anyway,
Toronto.
okay,
With all due respect, I've done planning all over North America, with the greatest respect.
tell
And
me-
I have buildings all over North America. So please, don't confine me.
okay. Well, I think some of the bylaws are going to confine you, but anyway.
That's fine. That's
Okay, the
why they're there.
13 Okay, the 13 boundary trees and the 4 public trees, I'm going to assume, make an assumption, that you don't have any permission from either the neighbors or the town to move these trees.
We haven't gotten into those details because we're still here trying to approve both the zoning and the use and the height and the density. So that will follow.
Well, if it doesn't follow, what happens?
It will follow. It'll be part of the process. We have to have discussions with staff.
Well, I think the question is, what if you were given an approval, but then you can't get the approval from the municipality or the neighbors to move these trees?
Then again, as you very well know, Mr. Mayor, there's the Ontario Land Tribunal, and we'll take whatever issues that are conflicting that we can resolve to the tribunal, and the tribunal will provide a decision on that basis.
Councillor Noyes.
Nothing further?
Yeah, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions that popped in while we were chatting. One was that we get the reports on the Thursday as well.
Sorry?
When you get the report, when the public gets the report, I think a lot of people think we get the reports in advance and like a bootleg copy.
I understand.
We get it when everybody else gets it.
Right.
Is your project development team here? Like who else is with you tonight from your project? You've mentioned others. Is there other members from the project development team?
There's, well, I'll ask him to stand. There is Mike Dantini, who's part of the ownership, and there's Bob, Martin, who's the project engineer and project manager.
Okay, so there are, and that's good. I was hoping there'd be
Sure.
some people from your team
I
here.
typically don't travel alone, yes.
The other question was with respect to the trees, and I understand trees can be removed and permits can be taken and you need compliance in order to do that, all that fun stuff. But the trees that we're talking about on the property, I believe have an impact on the neighboring properties because their root system is holding their dune in place so that they don't have erosion. I'm just wondering, of the other projects you worked on, have any of them been on sand dunes?
Yes.
Okay. And you could provide details on that project?
I'll have my experts provide the details as they deal with the issues arising, yes.
So that's yes or no?
That's yes, meaning if you're concerned that a tree is going to be impacted, that will be dealt with by the appropriate experts.
No, my question was specific to which projects have you worked on in the past that have been on dune lands?
I said multiple.
Okay, and you can provide some details on.
I can give you the address of the, and the location if you so wish, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Back to you, Councillor Christensen.
Just following up on Councillor Lewis's comment, could you also provide information about the impact of, on any other properties, on the work where you have worked on dunes?
Yes,
Because I'm very concerned about potential adverse impacts.
I understand.
Anyone else? Mr. Pompili, I'm a little surprised when you mentioned that this is a hotel-type project. That doesn't appear as one of the requested permitted uses
Agreed.
in your application. Can you clarify that for me?
Well, the hotel concept came because of the rental. There's going to be multiple rentals, short-term rentals and long-term rentals. So we came up with a concept whereby either our hotel or hotel-like manager will deal with that on behalf of the condo board. That's the rationale for that.
So my concern would be, and maybe you can address this, a hotel would be a commercial use.
Yes,
An apartment or a short-term rental would be a residential use, although the short-term does have commercial connotations. You've not asked for any commercial use here. You've asked for mixed core use, but it seems not to be applicable because the commercial use that you're proposing, according to Mr. Morton, is going to be simply confined to those people who occupy units in the building.
yes, and I think that was a consideration initially, and that to provide flexibility by our planner, and we'll amend that as we have to. Just to mutual satisfaction.
So when you're building on a dune, according to the report here, there are a number of things that you have to go through that aren't typical for construction on a non-dune property.
Yes,
Slope stabilization for
Sure.
one, some engineering aspects with respect to the ground upon which the building is located.
shoring and
Those
the
would
like.
those would all add to the cost of construction of the building, would
course.
they not?
yes.
So, is it, you mentioned, I think, before that these are luxury units, so there aren't going to be any affordable rental units in this building?
Based on the recent announcement by both the federal government and the provincial government, there might be, and we have done that kind of a combination in the past, but again, there will be luxury type of condo units.
So, do you have some idea what the cost point might be to construct any one of these units?
No.
So, how are you able to determine whether or not it might qualify for an affordable unit?
We'll go through the process. We have experts that will deal with that as well.
And the final question I have is, municipalities are under a lot of pressure to build more homes faster by the provincial government. This seems to be a pretty complex project. And how does it fit into the build more faster rules that the provincial government has been implementing over the last 3-4 years?
As other buildings do, to the tune of 100-story buildings. They're typically done in a structured format which moves quickly. We typically build high-rise buildings at a floor a week.
And I'm wondering if you've taken into account any of the local neighborhood when you came up with this particular proposal.
Of course.
You did.
We've had discussions, yes.
You've had discussions with whom?
We've had discussions with abutting neighbors and also the community in general.
Okay, I think we're going to hear from the
I'm sure you-
abutting neighbors.
I'm sure, I've heard from them, and I'm sure you will as well, and that's their right, so.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions by members of council? Thank you very much, Mr. Pompili.
My pleasure, thank you.
So I'm now going to go to if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the application other than the applicant or the applicant's agent, please come forward. Mr. Patton, is there anyone in the digital waiting room that has indicated they'd like to address council at this point?
Your worship, there's two people. If you want to just ask to make sure they're in favor, then we'll wait, because they could be, they haven't indicated.
Okay, so we'll ask if there's anyone that's watching this digitally, whether they wish to address council at this stage in support of the application. Raise your hand, or,
No, I know one of them was joining Teams for the first time, so we'll just give them a second in case they.
sure.
I'm not seeing any, your worship.
Okay. Then, we're going to move to the part of the meeting where I'm going to ask people to come forward if they wish to speak in opposition to the application, or if they have questions that they want to address to council for our staff to consider. When you come forward, please give your name and your address for the record, because we have to maintain this record for the purposes of the Ontario Land Tribunal, should the matter end up being dealt with that by that body. So, we've had a lot of communications from a lot of people, some of you I see here, but you're entitled to come forward and provide us with your comments. If you've already provided something to the staff and it's part of the report PBBS 40/2025, it's part of the public record now, but you're certainly entitled to come forward this evening. Once we're finished with this public meeting, we'll be dealing with report PBBS 40/2025. So, please come forward, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address your worship, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Redekop, members of council, and committee members. I'm Fred Tonin. I live at 528 Ridgeway Road with my wife, that part of Ridgeway Road that's Millington Skyway. We've owned the property for 42 years. I've had conversation with Mr. Pompili shortly a couple years ago. I don't want to be very rude, but I can give you the uptake of what he said. He came into my driveway, he said, "Is there another way into this property?" I said, "There's a lot around there." He said, "I just bought this property." I said, "Okay, yeah." I'm planning to put a tower on the property. How tall? I don't know. Not sure. It's zoned for 3 stories. Well, I'm going to get the zoning changed. That's the extent of my conversation. Let's make things very simple. I can answer his question. I will not cooperate with him, and my property, I'll go into where my property is located, okay? So we'll keep things really simple, all right? It's right off the bat. And I'm sorry we're going to have to come back here again and go through this charade. It's unbelievable, okay? All my neighbors want this property to be developed, but we like them developed according to what we have in the way of planning. It's a beautiful piece of property. Our own Crystal Beach secondary plan states there should be sensitive architectural designs. Can I emphasize the word sensitive? My wife and I are in our 80s. We're fortunate to live here. I've lived in, and my wife has lived in, and we have lived in a lot of cities. I vacationed in all kinds of beach communities and all kinds of countries. And every time I get back to Crystal Beach, I realize how lucky we are. Don't destroy what we have. No, my property, I'm sorry.
Could you folks just refrain from cheering, clapping, or booing, please? Just make the meeting go along a lot further.
Yes.
Please proceed.
Thank you, sorry. I'll describe our property. Our property shares the dune with the western side of this proposal, the Ridgeway side proposal. If built, you know, obviously century-old trees are going to be destroyed. You can't move century-old trees. That's quite ridiculous. The setbacks on this proposal are ridiculous. If this proposal goes ahead, my property, my dune, my trees are going to cave in. My retaining wall is going to cave in. My decks are going to be destroyed. That's going to happen to all the neighbors. And again, I don't want to be repetitive, but obviously this development's going to, it doesn't even look like the existing neighborhood. How would you like to walk out to your backyard and inches from your backyard have 10 stories going up with balconies looking down at you? The obvious negative effects, I don't want to be repetitive again, it's going to block the sunshine, it's going to cause light at nighttime, it's going to be noisy, privacy's going to be destroyed. You know, we're a community of seniors and hardworking people. In most cases, our property is our biggest financial asset. If this thing goes through, the property values in the whole area are going to fall. Who wants this in amongst what we have? I won't go into parking because it's obviously a real concern. Anybody can show up on Thursday night or Sunday night concerts and see there's no parking. They're parked all over the village. And just wait till the Palmwood Hotel gets open. Another 150 seats in there, plus, you know, terraces. All right. Now, my major concern is safety. I live on Norrington Skyway. Families go down up the middle of the road because they have strollers. They can't do the 40 stairs on the sidewalk to get down to the beach. Now, I'm going to describe just a few of the accidents I've seen on the Norrington Skyway. Okay? A car came up, sheared off a telephone pole, caved in the front of a cottage, took out 40 feet of deck and fencing. That's number one. Number two, a stolen car driven by two gentlemen, real young guys that were drunk, came up the road, got airborne, eventually landed at the bottom of the street and went 20 feet into the beach. Fortunately, it was nighttime, nobody was on the beach. There have been there's been many more, when I used to talk to my neighbors, but I've witnessed 2 vehicles being totaled that were parked on that road. You really want more traffic on that road? In the wintertime, there's constantly cars slipping and sliding and getting stuck. In fact, last winter, the people sanding the hill could not even get up. Now, again, my neighbors have no problem with this property being developed. In fact, someone with sensitivity could really do a phenomenal job, you know, blending in what's natural and what we have. So, I have one question. Who assumes liability when our properties are damaged? No one's answered that question. I keep getting different answers when I ask. Who assumes liability?
Well, that'd be a civil matter, and you'd have to speak.
So we have to hire a lawyer, we have to go through expenses and all that, is that right?
Well, lawyers don't work for free.
So does that sound fair to you?
So, Mr. Tonin, that's not a question that's relative to the actual application, so I'm going to decline to answer that.
Fair enough, okay, all right. Anybody have any questions for me?
That's usually what I get to ask. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Tonin?
All right.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Tonin, and thank you for allowing EAC to come out and enter the property from your point there. I do have one question, and that is, I believe the biggest concern from your perspective is also the dealing with the dune and how that will impact the property of yours when sand is taken away from.
Oh, yes, but it's not only my property. This isn't my backyard, but I'm not a NIMBY person. I realize we need development, but this is actually my backyard. How can you possibly do what this proposal intends to do without my permission to come onto my land, without my property caving in? And all the way around, there are other people, a gentleman around the corner just spent $40,000 putting up a retaining wall. That's going to be destroyed. One of my neighbors, who's a renter, said, if this goes forward, I'm moving. I mean, the impact's going to be enormous.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Mr.
I
Chairman.
thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Brian Treble. I live at 6075 Summer Street in Niagara Falls, and I'm a registered professional planner representing a number of people in the room tonight. I think maybe they want a show of hands just so you know who has been involved in some discussions with myself around concerns on this
Will you be
property.
speaking on behalf of them, or will some of them also be speaking?
There are a number of them that also want to speak, and I'll try and be really brief and quick, Your Worship, just to allow them with their expert knowledge to speak as well. So the concern, I guess, that I've really had in discussing this with the neighbors is comes right down to what is the type of use that's proposed. And I think you guys have had a really good discussion around that, but I'm not sure we have clarity yet. The neighbors, I think I can say safely, and we heard it from Mr. Tonin, understand that something needs to happen on this property and something can happen on this property. And we've even had discussions that what could happen in this property will not necessarily be more of the same. So it could be something different than cottage-style developments of the neighborhood. But this property as proposed, or this development as proposed, simply doesn't fit. It's shoehorned in and of major concern based on size, but then also based on use. If we were talking an apartment building, I think the neighbors could live with a certain amount of units on this property. But if we're talking a luxury hotel, then to your point, Mr. Worship, that sounds commercial to me, which is in the wrong location. So it would be very helpful for the public if we understood exactly what the proposal was that was before us, and I think it would be helpful for you guys as well. The other concern that I had, I've really shortened my notes just to try and be brief, Mr. Mayor. The question around the secondary plan, I heard Mr. Morton say that the secondary plan is not in force and effect. But I read the material on the OLT website, and I thought it was in force and effect, save for a couple of site-specific properties, this being one of them. So that the secondary plan policies, I believe, are relevant and should be considered when you give this application a fulsome review and a fulsome evaluation. This property is subject to the board, as I understand it, and so the site-specific OP and the site-specific, the site-specific designation, the site-specific zoning, and the designations proposed for this property are not in full force and effect, but the rest of the secondary plan is, I believe. And there's a lot of messaging in there around how to develop Crystal Beach, efforts that council put in and staff put in that are very important and very valuable. You know, it talks about balancing the type of development with the character of the community, acknowledging that infill intensification and increased densities are going to be required. So, you know, as I stand here, I guess what I'm really trying to say is we get that something has to happen, but this isn't the one. This isn't the proposal that makes the most sense for this property. And from a professional planning perspective, I would have a hard time recommending this as good planning. I think I'll stop there and answer questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Treble. Any questions of Mr. Treble? Thank you very much for your concise recitation of your concerns.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go, I'll go down into the front row, maybe work my way back. Please come forward. You're in the front row. You're in the front row.
My name is John Platts. I'm at 3710 Crystal Beach Drive. I'm here, I was asked by my wife to come here. She's doing line dancing. So I'm here to talk about what we are now talking about here. And it's interesting because I didn't know anything about this entire event, this proposal, until, frankly, just the last few days. And I guess first of all, I'm struck by the fact that I heard from the representative of the applicant the word condo hotel. And I'm equally shocked that here everybody thinks about short-term rental, that was a conversation. So I don't know how we can have such a disconnect right off the bat in terms of how you approach this whole subject matter. So that'd be number one. Number two, when I think about a condo hotel, I do think about downtown Toronto. And I do think about the folks who are occupying that. Oftentimes they're absentee owners. The concern about Airbnb, what the impact is going to be there because of all of that. And then perched on the hill, so keep in mind, I'm on Crystal Beach Drive, so we have a nice little walk on Terrace Lane to get to the park, to listen to music, take our lawn chairs, great time. And I'm thinking to myself, there's going to be this big building to my right when I try to go into the park in what has become what I consider to be one of the most pleasant places for a family outing. That, in my opinion, is going to disappear when we have what is going to become the gentrification of that whole area. We already have the Palmwood, and I called the owner of the Palmwood out of interest saying, hey, you've got your building here, why is it not filled yet? What's going on here? And he told me the prices that he's charging for those units. And if you don't know, you should go ask him, because you and I can never afford to live there, ever. So now we're talking about adding a whole new dimension. This new building, this luxury building, condo hotel. That's going to bring in a whole different attitude, if you wish, into the whole community. So where we have enjoyed a very quiet existence, and I hate to say, we've been here only about 2.5 years. So we arrived here with the same idea that from my friend here who was just speaking before me, came here with the idea this is a beautiful place to come to retire, to have a good life. It's the family environment. It's the wonderful recreation. It's the quiet, except for the concert. It's a good time. This is going to be highly disruptive, and I don't want to stand here as being a person of not in my backyard. That's not what I'm talking about here. I think we're talking about a serious, major disruption to the community. Anyways, I speak on behalf of my wife and myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Platts. Before you go, are there any members of council that have any questions? If not, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up this side of the room and then I'll go back over to this side. So is there anyone else on this side that wishes to address council? Please come forward, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Rose Dorenzo. I own Lot 4 and 5 facing Terrace Lane. I've had Lou approach me and ask me if I would like to sell my 2 lots. And when I heard his offer, it was peanuts for lakefront property, so I said, I'm sorry, I won't even entertain it. So then the next approach was, would I like to be a partner in this project? And I said, well, there's no harm in moving forward as long as I don't have to make any financial commitment. But shortly after we progressed, I knew that I could not work with that team, so I removed myself from the application. But I'm here now to discuss some of my concerns. Since the property is adjacent to mine and definitely will have some impact. I know that Section 4F says that this project is not going to have any depreciating or deterioration effect upon the adjoining properties, and that it would offer an overall positive effect that would have, I don't see it on my property. One of my concerns is drainage. The flow of water is towards the lower land, which is Terrace, my lot's on Terrace Lane. And I know Mother Nature has its own way of dealing with issues, even though we may have the best made plans to prevent problems from happening. Now, the other issue is the setbacks. The west side of Lot 4 the property, the building is sitting right on the property line, as you mentioned before, 2 or 3 inches. And then on the other section on the back end of my lots, I think it's 0.2 meters when it should be 1.5. But I feel that without a retaining wall, everything, well, even with a retaining wall, all of that structure that's facing Terrace Lane would have impact on, directly onto my property. But I'm just not sure, before this project was proposed, if there was any feasibility study for a project of this size in a community of Crystal Beach, particularly since there was a recent attempt on Erie Road for a similar type of project, and that was not very successful. So I think some of my concerns have already been addressed by other parties, so I don't want to repeat myself. I just want to be heard, and I hope I have been. Thank you.
We've heard you, Ms. Dorenzo. Are there any questions of Ms. Dorenzo? Thank you very much. So I'm not going to hold you to it, but is there anybody else on this side that would like to address council before I go to this side? Okay, then I'm going to go to this side. Please come forward. Gentleman in the blue shirt. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, for letting me to address this tonight. My name is Robert Ketteman. My wife Gloria and I own the property at 3727 Crystal Beach Drive. It's approximately a quarter mile away from the development. A little history about my family. We're Americans. We've been using our properties in Crystal Beach. My family has been there since 1913. And I have spent my entire life there, 62 years, for around 4 months every year. So I'm very integrated into this community. We have seen the evolution, the highs, the lows since the amusement park and what's evolved since then. To be clear, like others that you've heard from, I'm in favor of development, responsible and sensitive development to continue to improve the village of Crystal Beach and, of course, the town of Fort Erie. So my comments are really going to be a little more general and higher level, specific to the elements of the Crystal Beach secondary plan. So while I understand that this particular parcel is under appeal, I believe it's under appeal by the people that want to develop it, okay? But there is actually guidance in the plan that was developed. So that the secondary plan, as I've read it, and I'm not an expert in this area, is that it was implemented in November of 2021. So that was less than 4 years ago. Nothing's really changed in that time. And in fact, I would say perhaps things have even slowed down, the demand for real estate, since that was kind of at the height of the COVID onslaught. Okay, and significant resources and hours were put into the development of this secondary plan. It was very thoughtful. It's 44 pages long, and there's a lot of elements in there that should be considered. I'm just going to cite a few, and as I was reading through it, I wanted to understand and educate myself as to if this proposal really was aligned with what the secondary plan was intended to do. So the purpose of the amendment in section 2 of the secondary plan was to develop the most appropriate in the most appropriate locations to ensure growth has guidance and choice over long term. So I interpret that to mean that this is a guiding document for the entirety of the village of Crystal Beach, not just this parcel. And so I wanted to cite a few specific elements to that. Page 9, paragraph 2, I'm just going to quote and then we'll decide. Select areas of the plan area exhibit large residential lot areas where consolidations have potential to occur and present some infilling opportunities. It goes on to say, generally these are areas of transition between different land uses such as commercial, institutional to residential, okay, or adjacent to major road networks, parks, or commercial nodes. In my opinion, this proposed development does not meet that guidance. Page 11, paragraph 4, the location of the area under consideration with respect to, 1, the adequacy and the existing and proposed highway system in relation to the development of such proposed areas, and point 2, the convenience and accessibility of the site for vehicular and pedestrian traffic and traffic safety in relation thereto. We talked a little bit already about the size of the roads around that area, how congested it is already. In my opinion, this proposed development does not meet the guidance that's outlined about traffic. Page 14, compatibility with adjoining areas. This is a good one. The land use amendments proposed through the secondary plan are intended to reinforce the community as largely residential in character, but also to provide for growth in key areas where vacant large parcels can be comprehensively planned and remain sensitive to adjacent land use and existing character. It goes on to say that consideration can and will be given to transitional matters such as change of height, built form massing, I don't know what that means, but it's in there, issues of privacy and overlooking, amount of coverage or setback changes. The intent of the secondary plan is to provide sensibly located intensification opportunities appropriately scaled in relation to the adjacent form and use. I think it's pretty clear that this proposed development does not meet that guidance. Page 20, parking. We've had a lot of discussion about parking, but I'm going to build on it. Crystal Beach 2019 parking study, informational report, PDS 64-2019. Generally, the study conclusions identified that parking into the future can be accommodated with current parking availability, with the exception of Crystal Beach Waterfront Park, which should be reviewed for optimization of parking facilities near the term. My observation, like others have also cited, is that parking in this area of this proposed development is already stressed, really stressed. And the parking garage of the proposed development, 3 stories parking garage, is inadequate to meet the needs of the residents and their guests. Thus, this proposed development, in my opinion, does not meet this guidance. I'm almost done. Page 24, paragraph 2A. In considering medium density and high density residential uses, redevelopment and infill residential intensification on vacant land, regard shall be given to the following: the height, bulk, arrangement of buildings and structures to achieve a harmonious design, I think as Ms. Christensen had used before. Harmonious design, compatible integration with the surrounding area and not negatively impact on lower density residential uses. I'm hopeful that we can all agree that this proposed development does not meet that guidance either. So in summary, I'm simply requesting that the town follow the guidance of this 44-page document that significant resource and time and expertise was put into it, called our secondary plan. In my opinion, there's no need to deviate from what the proposed development and rezoning of those parcels was designed to do. And there's a whole bunch of criteria in there, but in my mind, the 2 that stand out are specific to that parcel, to follow the guidelines of the plan as they were initially written, to specifically adhere to the maximum building height of 3 stories and a site density of 50 units per hectare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ketterman. Do any members of council have any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff. Before I start, my name is Ben Burke. I have a cottage at 3729 Crystal Beach Drive. Before I start, if you'll permit me to give out some homework to each of you. I'll start over here. I ask you to flip the page to look at a little sketch or a photograph. Yes, I have it. Sorry, I'm missing one. I have 6. Okay, thank you. So, my name is Ben Burke, as I said. I'm a professional engineer, but retired. That's the new designation. I have over 53 years' experience as a structural consulting engineer, and I've worked in Canada and in 4 other continents. I've, seen it all in terms of structures, from residential and commercial high-rise buildings, hotels, factories, schools, data centers, and multi-purpose buildings. And I'm addressing you today not just in my capacity as an engineer, but as a local resident who has concerns on 3 categories, really. The first one is not my area of expertise, it's zoning, but I'll talk to it. The second one is environmental impacts. As an engineer, I understand science, I can read reports, and I can interpret them. So I hope to give you some information as I've read all the reports that were submitted as part of this application. I'll also address technical and safety issues in my capacity as a structural engineer. The first point I want to make is that the applicant has tended to confuse everybody. On one part he's saying apartment, and the other part he's saying condominium, and the other part he's saying luxury hotel. Well, just to fill you in, you may be familiar, or may not be, that hotel chains like Marriott are now taking over buildings and providing hotel accommodation where people can come in on a weekend or a week and rent. And that sort of a situation is a transient population coming and going. So just consider that Marriott have taken over this building or something like it. And somebody is coming and they're driving in, and the first thing they're faced with is 3 driveways. Oh shoot, which level am I on? Do I park down below? Do I go up to the 2nd floor? Do I go to the 3rd? Total confusion. Okay, so we'll solve it by providing a valet service. So they pull up outside. Where's the room for valet service? So that's at the first level. Now at the second level, where there's a commercial aspect pushed into this development. Well, I don't care if it's a commercial, no matter what size, somebody must work there. Where's the parking for the workers? Where's the parking for the delivery? Mr. Morton has highlighted that in his report, his PBS 40/2025. There's no provision for offloading, for turning. It's got to be done out on a roadway that's inadequate, adjacent to 2 roads, Ridgeway and Lake Avenue, within 20 meters, and we have 3 exits from parking at the same time. Talk about a disaster. Talk about an accident waiting to happen. This is absolutely chaos. So from a zoning point of view, if you were to go for your core mixed use, which I'm not sure is what's being applied for, the building is 32 meters high. It is not, unfortunately, Mr. Morton, 21. And if you turn to page 2 of the little diagram I sent to you, I gave to you, I've highlighted on the right-hand side, relative to grade, the ground floor, I've highlighted all the elevations, and if you look at the right-hand side, it's 32.125, 32 meters, 102 feet high. So now, that's just the height of the building. The second aspect is the minimal setbacks, and this has implications for structure, and I'll come back to that later. Setbacks are meant to provide privacy. Setbacks are meant to respect neighbors. Sticking a building right on the property line is disrespectful. It shows utter disrespect for your neighbor. And then, on top of it all, if you go to the diagram that I've provided on the last page, you will see where the top of the hill, where Mr. Tonan's property is, it's located at the elevation of the 4th floor. So Mr. Tonan will walk out his backyard, and if you go to the second page, on the left-hand side, that's over there, you see that's the hill from Ridgeway, and at the top of the hill there's a red line, and that's the 4th floor. That's Mr. Tonan's property, with a balcony at the 4th floor looking into him, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units looking down upon him. What a great experience. He could open a stage there and provide a production, you know. So, you know, I've gone on enough about zoning, but I think you're getting my point. 385 units on a lot that should have only 50 units. You know, we're only over by about seven times, which is ridiculous. If you were to go to the town's core mixed use number 1, it allows 4 stories, maximum height 15 meters, a yard setback would be 7.5 instead of 4.1, and the rear and side setbacks would be anywhere between 2.5 and 10 meters. The scale of the proposal just does not fit. It does not make sense. It's not a downtown. It's not a major hub. It's a residential community. This seems to me to be an attempt to push density and height far beyond what the site can support. It also smacks of greed. I hate to use the word, but the idea is maximize the width, maximize the height, get as many units as you can so that I can get a return on the purchase price of the property. So if you go to page 1, on page 1, I've superimposed to scale the height of the building, and I'm looking from the exit or the entrance into the new development, and I'm looking at the sewage treatment plant. Let's not use the euphemism wastewater treatment plant. It's a sewage treatment plant. In the middle, you can see there's a stack coming up. That's the generator, emergency generator stack. Now you may recall, or you may not want to recall, the discussion that was held in Regional Council in March 2023, when they highlighted the fact that during the snowstorm of December 23rd, 2022, the whole electrical system in the area collapsed, and the sewage treatment plant went on to its emergency generator, which ran for 9 hours continuously until it ran out of fuel, and then they pumped 30 million litres of sewage into the lake. I don't know if people know that, and if you know it. Okay, so now you look at this, and you look at emergency generator stack going up, and the top of the stack is level with the 6th floor. Now in the report, I'm going on now to environmental issues. In the report issued by RWDI, where they were looking at their odor study, they said the setback of the building that they were looking at the time, because this development has had several applications, that the setback was 30 meters. That's actually in the report, not 4.2. The distance from that stack to the face of the building is 38 meters. That's about 110 feet. Now, in the wind study, or in the odor study as well, they look at the wind, and and if you look at the wind chart, they say the winds from the north to the north-northeast, it only occurs 6% of the time for one, and 6%, less than 6% for the other, for a total of about 11% of the year. So now imagine that you have the wind blowing 11% of the year, 42 days out of the year, blowing the smoke from a stack which has to be run, the generator has to be run once a month to confirm that it works, and in the case of an emergency, it has to run continuously, maybe for 9 hours when the power goes out again. And the people at the 6th floor have this fume blowing if it's in the winter, because that's when the north winds blow. So, you know, I'm just pointing out the ludicrous situation where you have a building more than twice the height of the stack, and the stack is less than 100 feet or 110 feet away. Secondly, RWDI did a great study on noise, but in their study, if you look at it, it says that the noise levels are exceeded at nighttime. And yet, nobody has any problem with that. The proponent has no problem. Our WDI, in their conclusion, didn't highlight that comment, which should have been highlighted. So, you know, they had the wrong setback in their study. They said 30 meters. The context was misleading, as they said, you know, the sewage treatment plant, you know, there are homes in the area, nobody complains about the smell, nobody complains about the noise, but what they forget is the houses pre-existed before the plant was built. This now, you're asking newcomers in an apartment to sit there and look out at a stack, have noise at night, you know, just close the windows and forget about it, and then you're going to have some degree of pollution. Now, the other thing that's going to happen if you look at this building is just imagine the predominant winds, as we know, are southwest and west. So just imagine a wind blowing from there and coming around. What's going to happen the sewage treatment plant? What's going to happen the surrounding buildings? RWDI are world-renowned for wind studies. They do it all the time. My firms have employed them. They're second to none. They're the best in the world. In fact, Western Canada, the University of Western Canada pioneered wind studies way back. So they fail to address anything that happens out of that. Just imagine, again, if you look at that sketch one, a wind coming over that building, you're going to get downdrafts, you're going to get acceleration of wind around the building. You know, it's going to be awful. It's going to be awful. So now let me go on to the next item. We're getting into the technical issues here now. Well, sorry, one before the technical issues, the tree removal. 60 trees are proposed to be removed by the tree consultant, the consultant employed by Mr. Pompili. 42 are, sorry, of the 60, I beg your pardon, of the 60, 42 are going to be taken away. 13 of those belong to the neighbours. No permission has been sought or granted for the removal of those trees. You know, not a single tree on the site itself would be left in place. 0 trees left on the actual site that's being developed. Now I want to talk about the actual technical issues and the problems that I see with the actual scheme. If you look at the drawings, there appears to be no allowance for air intake or air exhaust from the parking structures. You look at the plans, you see where all the parking spaces are. There are no vertical shafts. So how is the carbon monoxide dealt with? Well, again, if you go to the last sketch that I provided, the dotted line that you see rising up is the profile on the west face of the building. Now, we've seen the front elevation of the buildings, and we've seen the rear elevation on Terrace Lane. Nobody has seen the west elevation of the building. The developer has not provided, or the architect has not provided, a west elevation or an east elevation. Just look at that profile. It starts at grade, it obliterates the ground floor on the west side. On the second floor where the pool is, and I've inserted the pool to show you where it is, more than half the length of the building is obliterated beneath the earth. And when you get up onto the top floor, like I said, Mr. Tonin is going to be looking at somebody on the 4th floor looking into his backyard. And then as you go down at the backside onto Terrace Lane, you can see my profile of the soil taken from the geotechnical survey, the survey that was done for the geotechnical study. I'm showing the profile of the soil way above where they're showing it. So all of that soil has to be removed. So I'm just pointing out, you know, carbon monoxide, where's the exit for the carbon monoxide? We don't see shafts going up. The west side is blocked off by a shoring wall or a wall. Where's the carbon monoxide going? It's got to go somewhere. Is it going to go out into the neighbour on the east side, just drift out in an open space, you won't provide windows? We're at the boundary. Are they just going to suck up carbon monoxide? A nice question. So finally, I'm going to come to my area of expertise, which is shoring or structural engineering. So again, I'd like you to go to the second page. That's this one. And on that second page, on the left-hand side, I've shown the elevation of and again, this is taken from the survey, the elevation on the west side, and that's the left-hand side of the drawing. And you can see the foundation level down at the bottom of the left-hand side, according to the geotechnical report, is going to be at an elevation of 175 to 174.4. The elevation of the ground is 188.7. So that's, as you're starting a foundation, you're anywhere from 13.3 to 14.3 meters below grade. Put that in perspective in feet, 43 foot 6 or 47 feet, depending on where you get your foundation at. A shoring wall has to be put in. Now, we're on a sand dune, and let's say the development goes ahead, all the trees are removed. What stabilizes a sand dune? Trees, plants. That's what stabilizes a dune. They're gone. If they're gone, now the shoring contractor comes in, and he's got to drill caissons. And again, if you read the geotechnical report, he goes into this in some detail about and describes how a shoring with what are called intersecting caissons. They're essentially large diameter, weak concrete that's drilled down the full depth. But when you drill down, you've got to have something to dig into. You've got to have a toe. So I'm just going to draw a very quick diagram just to show you something. If this is the ground on top, and this is my foundation level down here, I've got a big beam, and I'm going to show you two supports. These are my two supports, one up here, one down there. This is the earth pressure pushing that wall. It's got to have a support down here. We're going down onto chert limestone. Chert limestone is almost equivalent of flint. The chert limestone was used by the neutral indigenous people as a weapon to keep peace between the Iroquois and the Hurons, because both of those needed, almost like flint, they needed the chert to make arrowheads and weapons. So this rock is really hard. So now we're 47 feet down. You're up here, and he's drilling down, and they put in a caisson intersecting. So they drill one here, they drill one next to it, and they intersect them. It's very weak concrete. And then about every third or fourth one, they drop a steel soldier pile down, but you've got to get into the rock. Who's going to cut that rock? And as you're jackhammering the rock, you're vibrating the sand. This whole wall, you excavate down then, and this whole sand dune is going to shake like heck. Now, the neighbors say they're not going to give them tiebacks. So a tieback is where in a semi-permanent condition, instead of getting this, you put a tieback in at an angle like that to hold the shoring. So you have a piece of shoring, and this is Mr. Tonan's property. You're going in under his property. You have to get his permission, drilling into the rock. You're 47 feet up. Can you imagine the length of that? Not only that, but even out on Crystal Beach, they're going to have to go onto Crystal Beach Drive, onto the public land to do the same thing. They'll have to do it on the east side as well. So all of that is a real concern. If they don't get permission for a tieback, they have to do what's called a raker system. And so Mr. Tonan is over here, and this is the soldier pile. This is where you want to do the work. You've now got to provide rakers, steel members coming up at an angle to support the shoring. But we still aren't sure if we've got a toe down here that can support it. So this whole thing is fraught with danger. And I would just warn council, not warn, but just advise council. By giving permission for this, you may be in legal jeopardy. You may be legally liable if anything goes wrong. The risks are pretty severe and pretty high that something will go wrong. My suggestion is have the developer respect the setbacks. A 9.5 meter setback on the west side would be not perfect, but a heck of a lot better than a 0 setback. It would get him out of danger. A lower level development, going down to rock is still possible, but then the shoring is at a kind of a scale that's more realistic. Gentlemen and ladies, that's all I have to say.
Mr. Burke, I certainly enjoyed your lesson.
Okay.
Is there a test after this?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you, Mr. Mayor, I forgot to tell you, there's homework and I'll be picking it up tomorrow.
That's what I was afraid of.
Any questions?
Councillor Noyes.
The mayor I hope we're not going to have any test after this, but anyway, no one's mentioned anything about the water level when they're drilling down on that. How would the water level affect this area?
I actually had two pieces. Again, there was a flood in November 20th, 2020, where we had a massive thunderstorm in the area. I don't know if anybody recalls, again, the entry into the sewage treatment plant was impacted on Ridge Road. And what amazes me, again, about the report done by RVA, that's RV Anderson, was that they talk about the town standard of a 5-year storm. A 5-year storm may be the standard, but we're not getting 5-year storms anymore. We're getting 100-year storms and we're getting worse. And the idea that we can have a 5 cubic meter retaining tank to control water on this site is a bit ludicrous. You know, you're going to get overflow. Where's it going to flood? It's going to flood out into the public park on Terrace Lane. You're going to have erosion of the adjacent properties. You know, when rain falls on the balconies on the west side, where's the rain going to fall? Where's it going to go? It's not going to be collected back in. It's going to drain off somewhere. You know, it doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Any other members of council? Councillor Lewis.
I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation and the information you've provided. And you mentioned Mr. Tonin putting on a show for the 4th floor. Do you have any details on that?
Well, if the development goes ahead, I'm proposing that I be his agent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who wishes to address council with respect to this? Mr. Patton, is there anyone in the digital waiting room that wishes to address council?
Your Worship, we still have 2 individuals in the waiting room. Just give it a minute, make sure they...
Sure. So if they would like to speak, perhaps they could raise their hand, their digital hand. Not seeing any action? Okay. Madam Clerk, have we received any additional correspondence since this report was prepared?
No additional comments following the addendum that was published today, which included one additional comment that was submitted after the report was published.
Okay. Then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. We're going to recess for 10 minutes, then we're going to come back and we're going to deal with report PBBS 40-2025. Okay, we're back from the recess, and Councillor Christensen, you have the resolution that puts report PBBS 40/2025 on the floor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Flagg, that Council receive for information purposes report PBBS 40/2025 regarding the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications for lands located at 3856 Terrace Lane and unassigned parcel 0-15097 Crystal Beach Drive.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor McDermott, you had your hand up?
Yes, Your Worship. I would like to make an amendment to this.
Do you have a seconder?
Yes. That the municipal council.
So do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do. Councillor Lewis.
Okay. Okay, so you have to move, and then you have to move your amendment and seconded by.
Okay. You want me to read the amendment?
Moving
now?
amendment, seconded by Councillor Lewis.
All right,
Please
thank you.
proceed.
Okay, so I would like to move this amendment that's seconded by Councillor Lewis, that the municipal council of the corporation of the town of Fort Erie denies the combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications 0PA08-2024 and ZBA 17-2024 submitted by Lou Pompili on behalf of the owners of 100005426 Ontario Incorporated and 310-1669 Nova Scotia Company for lands municipally known as 3856 Terrace Lane and unassigned parcel 01507 Crystal Beach Drive for the following reasons, amongst others. The proposal development does not align with the intent, policies, or guiding principles of the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan, which was adopted by Council in 2021 and was approved by Ontario Land Tribunal in 2023, following an extensive and inclusive public engagement process. The plan represents a community-driven vision for sustainable and context-sensitive growth. The Crystal Beach Secondary Plan contemplates a low-rise residential development of no more than 3 stories and 50 units on the subject lands. The applicant's proposal, comprising of a 10-story structure with a residential density of 385 units per hectare, is an excessive departure from the council-approved plan. The lack of compatibility with existing neighborhood character. The proposed development fails to achieve compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods in terms including scale, massing, height, setbacks, landscaping, and buffering to maximize privacy and minimize the impact on adjacent lower density uses. It does not reflect or respect the established cottage-style character that defines the identity of Crystal Beach. The proposal includes the removal of significant wetland, which is inconsistent with the environmental protection objectives outlined in the 2024 provincial policy statement. This action would represent a loss of natural heritage and contravenes provincial directives that prioritize ecological conservation and climate resilience.
Did you wish to speak to that, or no?
Well, I know there's other things to talk about, but I think I'll pass it on to the other councillors.
Okay. So the amendment is on the floor for questions or comments. Councillor Noyes?
I don't know if this is referring to the amendment. I think it might. I think what Councillor McDermott said, there were many concerns that were raised tonight, and I honestly, I'm not an engineer, but I don't really anticipate how there could even be a workaround what is being proposed. Everything from the trees to the minimum side yards to the water to the carbon dioxide to the entrances in and out. I don't even know I haven't had a clear idea or anything clarified to me exactly what this building is going to be used for. Whether it's going to be commercial, hotel, condos, apartments, I really don't know. So I'm thinking the amendment is appropriate to hopefully in time we'll find out. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Christensen.
I think that the amendment is well worded and captures my conclusions based on the reading of the report, my knowledge of the community, and repeated drive-bys since this was brought to my attention as chair of the Planning, Building, and Bylaw Services Committee. The application is not at all consistent with the current community, and I would draw everyone's attention again to the fact that the secondary plan was substantially approved in September 2023. That means that the town council has carried out the direction of constituents, residents of Crystal Beach, and with due consideration has clearly defined its intent for the village of Crystal Beach. The application does not, in my opinion, in any way fit that intent. And although the residents have indicated there are options that would fit that intent and would result in intensification that's appropriate, this is not the application that meets those criteria.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just have a couple of questions with respect to just a couple of questions, and then with respect to the second paragraph of, I don't know if you have a copy of this resolution, this amendment, Ms. Delwaria, but the second paragraph under nonconformity talks about 3 stories and 50 units. Is it 50 units per hectare in terms of the density for that parcel?
Yes, Your Worship, it's 50 units per hectare.
Okay, so I think we should insert that in the resolution. So after the number 50, I think it should be clear that it's 50 hectares, 50 units per hectare. Councillor McDermott? Okay, and Councillor Christensen, you're the seconder. That's an amendment that simply clarifies something that was omitted. So it shouldn't be just 50 units. Should be 50 units per hectare. Everybody clear on that? The other question that I had, Ms. Delwaria, is there have been some peer reviews undertaken, I think, with respect to some of these studies. I don't know what state they're in, but I presume that peer review work would be discontinued unless an appeal was filed, in which case would the peer review of the various reports continue?
Your Worship, if Council chooses to deny the application, if the peer review has already been sent out to the agency to complete their review, they would still complete that review, but we would not be sending any other report for peer review if it hasn't been sent out.
If there's an appeal at some point, will we then seek peer review of any of the studies that haven't been peer reviewed?
Depending upon the OLT, we can do that.
Okay. I think that would be prudent. Councillor Lewis.
Also,
Thank you. Anyone else? So Ms. Dewaria, just for context, the secondary plan was approved with the exception of a couple of parcels that are under appeal. And this amendment suggests that the essence of the secondary plan is still something that we can consider because we have to look at how this particular proposal or any proposal within that secondary plan area is affected by the policies outlined in that plan. Is that what we're doing?
Yes, Your Worship. Certain site-specific policies are not in effect, but the generality of the site, Crystal Beach, is in effect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, then I'm going to call the question on the amendment put forward by Councillor McDermott. All those in favor? None opposed to that. So I'm going to now call the question on the amended recommendation. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, this is the amended recommendation report PBBS 40-2025. All those in favor? And that is also unanimous. So that takes us then to consideration of bylaws. And Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Flagg, I'm sorry, I was going to say Darren, that bylaw number 65-2025 to confirm the actions of council at its special council meeting held June 30th, 20, is it April 1st?
No, it's afternoon.
2025 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor McDermott, you have third and final reading for this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Christensen, that bylaw 65-2025 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And we're going to go to old Councillor, what's his name? Councillor Flagg.
So kind. I have every confidence that Councillor Dubanow will be watching me somewhere doing this. Yeah. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Christensen that council adjourns at 8:22 p.m. to reconvene in the regular council meeting July 21st.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.
Christensen did it too.